I'm a 30-year-old guy, and I just got married to the love of my life. My wife and I had been planning our honeymoon for over a year. A dream trip to the Maldives. A secluded, all-inclusive beach resort. Just the two of us, finally relaxing after all the stress of wedding planning. That was the plan, at least. But somehow, my family decided that my honeymoon should be a family vacation. And when I refused, I became the villain. It all started at a family dinner. My wife and I were at my parents' house, along with my younger brother, older sister, and a few extended relatives who randomly show up to these things. Someone asked about our honeymoon, and I casually mentioned the Maldives. Big mistake. Immediately, my mom's eyes lit up. She went on about how beautiful the Maldives is, how she's always wanted to go. My dad chimed in, saying it sounded like a once-in-a-lifetime trip. Then, the joke that wasn't a joke happened. My mom, laughing, said, "Wouldn't it be fun if we all went?" My dad, dead serious, added, "Why should only you two have all the fun?" My wife and I laughed it off, thinking they were just messing around. Except they weren't. A few days later, I got added to a massive family group chat. The first thing I saw, a message from my sister talking about flight prices. My cousin had already found great deals on hotels. My aunt was asking about resort packages. My entire family was actively planning a trip to the Maldives, as if it was their idea in the first place. I immediately shut it down. I told them this was our honeymoon, just for my wife and me. They responded with a chorus of, "Oh, don't be so dramatic and we won't even bother you guys. We'll do our own thing." My mom sent a long message about how it's just a coincidence that they all wanted to visit the Maldives at the same time. My dad threw in the classic family should come first. I wasn't buying it, and neither was my wife. She was livid. She told me to make it clear to them that they weren't coming. I tried again, telling them outright that this wasn't happening. That's when my mom hit me with the guilt trip. "This will be the last big trip before we get too old. Why are you being so selfish?" My siblings piled on, saying I was being ungrateful, that I should just go with the flow. At this point, I was done arguing. But things only got worse. My cousin casually mentioned in the chat that he had booked flights. Then my aunt said she did too. Then, somehow, my wife's sister got involved and booked a flight. This wasn't just my immediate family anymore. This was turning into a full-blown family reunion. I called the resort in a panic. Sure enough, my family had booked rooms at the exact same resort we were staying at. My honeymoon had officially been hijacked. I begged them to cancel. They refused. My mom acted like I was being unreasonable. "We're not bothering you. We'll do our own thing." But then my brother let something slip. They had also booked excursions. The exact same ones my wife and I had planned, including a couple's massage. That was it. My wife and I sat down that night and made a decision. We weren't doing this. We started looking up other honeymoon destinations in secret, found a new location, booked everything. And then, without telling a single person, we canceled our Maldives trip. When my family found out, all hell broke loose. My mom called me in tears. She said I had ruined the family trip. My dad sent a long message about how I was prioritizing my wife over my family. My siblings flooded my phone with messages about how I was being selfish. Extended relatives, people who weren't even involved, started messaging me, saying I was overreacting. But the best part, they weren't mad that we went somewhere else. They were mad that they wasted money. They actually expected me to rebook the Maldives trip so they wouldn't lose their reservations. That wasn't happening. My wife and I got on a plane and left. And for the first time since this nightmare started, we could actually enjoy ourselves. Of course, my family didn't take that well. They went full meltdown mode. They accused me of excluding them from a trip that was never supposed to include them in the first place. And when I ignored them, they took it to social media. That was just the beginning. The meltdown started the second my family found out we had gone to Bora Bora instead of the Maldives. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. First, my mom, full breakdown. She called, crying so hard she could barely get words out. She kept repeating that I had ruined the family trip and how much effort they had put into planning it. She wasn't talking about my honeymoon. No, she was devastated about their vacation, as if I was personally responsible for their bad decisions. Then came the texts from my dad, a long-winded speech about how family should always come first and how I had changed ever since I got married. He made sure to mention how much my mother was suffering because of my selfishness, and how I was prioritizing my wife over my family. The group chat was next. My brother and sister bombarded me with messages. Apparently, I was the bad guy for not just going with the flow. My brother threw in something about how it wouldn't have been a big deal if we had just gone to the Maldives with them. My sister accused me of overreacting and punishing everyone by changing locations. Meanwhile, my wife wasn't having it. She told me point blank to stop engaging with them. The honeymoon had been hijacked and we weren't going to let them make us feel guilty for taking it back. But the drama wasn't stopping anytime soon. My aunt, who was never even invited, decided to chime in, calling me ungrateful for not appreciating how much my family loved me and wanted to be part of my life. Then my uncle jumped in, saying I had embarrassed my parents by ditching the trip. It was suddenly about family honor now, as if I had disgraced them by going on my own honeymoon, and then the group chat exploded. My brother started dropping passive-aggressive memes about people who forget where they came from. My sister made a dramatic exit, announcing that she was done with the drama even though she had been fueling it the whole time. My mom left the chat entirely, making sure to tell everyone how heartbroken she was first. My dad stayed silent, probably waiting for me to apologize. At first, I ignored it, but then my cousin, the one who had somehow managed to book his own flights without my knowledge, leaked our new honeymoon location. I had no idea how he found out, but suddenly, my entire family knew we were in Bora Bora, and instead of realizing how insane they looked, they doubled down. My parents demanded I rebook the original Maldives trip so they wouldn't lose money on the reservations. As if I was supposed to fix their mistake. I refused, obviously, and that's when the silent treatment started. For days, no one texted me. No passive-aggressive group chat messages, no calls, nothing. It was like they had all vanished. Then they changed tactics. They started calling my wife instead. My mom tried the emotional manipulation route, telling her she was tearing the family apart and how she had changed me. Ironically, this was after my parents had already started struggling with the costs of the trip. They had assumed we'd contribute financially, and when that didn't happen, they began arguing over who would cover the extra expenses. As if my wife had brainwashed me into wanting a honeymoon without my entire family tagging along. My dad followed up with a guilt trip voicemail, saying he hoped my wife was worth losing my entire family over. That's when things went from crazy to actually disturbing. I found out my brother had called the resort in Bora Bora, pretending to be me. He was trying to get details about our reservation. The resort shut him down immediately, and I made sure to add extra security measures to prevent any more interference. If they tried anything else, I wouldn't hesitate to take legal action. Luckily, the resort didn't fall for it. But the fact that he even tried was enough. My wife and I both decided we were done. We blocked several family members and refused to engage with them any further. At first, it felt like relief. But then the doubt started creeping in. Was I being too harsh? Could I have handled it differently? I knew setting boundaries was the right choice, but a part of me still wondered if things could have played out differently if they had just listened. Should I have just let them come along to avoid all this drama? I vented about the entire situation on Reddit. It was mostly just to get it off my chest, but within hours, the post blew up. Thousands of people weighed in, all saying the same thing. My family was completely insane. Reading those comments was the reality check I needed. And then something unexpected happened. A cousin I barely talked to messaged me privately. They told me the whole family was still in chaos over the canceled trip. But they also admitted that a lot of relatives actually agreed with me. They just didn't want to say it out loud. Apparently, my parents had been complaining to everyone about how I had betrayed them. But behind closed doors, some of my relatives thought they had taken things way too far. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about the honeymoon. This was about control. My family wasn't mad that I had taken a trip. They were mad that I had said no to them, and they weren't going to let that go anytime soon. The insanity wasn't over. Not even close. My mom took things to the next level with a Facebook rant. A long, dramatic post about selfish children who abandon their families the second they get married. She made sure to throw in phrases like, after everything we've done for him, and some people forget where they come from. No names, of course, but it was obvious who she was talking about. The comment section was a mess. Some of her friends were agreeing with her, talking about how kids these days don't value family. Others were asking if she was okay. And a few family members, ones I barely even spoke to, jumped in, talking about how sad the situation was. Then, the real division started. Some relatives unfollowed me, probably to stay on my mom's good side, but others started DMing me privately. A few cousins told me they secretly thought my parents had gone overboard. One even admitted that they were relieved someone finally stood up to them. But my siblings weren't done yet. They started spreading rumors, telling everyone that I was letting my wife control me. My brother was telling people that my wife had forced me to cancel the honeymoon and that I had changed since marrying her. My sister was telling a slightly different version, claiming I had gone against the family and that our parents were heartbroken. Apparently, she was making sure extended family members knew her side of the story first. And then, my dad made one last attempt. A single call, one final chance to fix everything. If I just apologized and agreed to come on the trip, all would be forgiven. The entire family was waiting for me. My dad said we could all just move forward if I made things right. I refused. Silence. Then, right before hanging up, my dad muttered, "You'll regret this someday." After that, they stopped trying to convince me. But not because they were finally respecting my decision. No, they had a much bigger problem to deal with. They were losing money. Since my wife and I weren't going, they were now stuck with extra rooms at the resort. So, they scrambled to sell them. The problem, the resort didn't allow name changes on bookings. They were stuck with them, out thousands of dollars, all because they refused to accept that our honeymoon wasn't a group vacation. That's when my mom made one last call. Dramatic sighs, long pauses, the works. She ended it with a "just hope you're happy." And then she hung up. I ignored it. My wife and I got on our flight to Bora Bora. For a moment, it finally felt like it was over. But the second we landed, I checked my email. A message from my cousin. "Hey, just a heads up, your parents are still trying to find out where you're staying." Apparently, they had been asking around, trying to figure out the exact resort. No clue what they were planning, but it didn't even matter at that point. We were done with them. We made sure to keep our location private and ignored any messages from family. But my sister wasn't done. A new Facebook post popped up. A picture of her, my brother, my parents, and a few extended relatives standing in front of the resort in the Maldives. The caption, "Having a great time in paradise with real family." At that point, I couldn't do anything but laugh. It was so obvious. A last-minute attempt to make it seem like they were the ones who had excluded me, not the other way around. My wife and I decided we were done paying attention to their drama. Then, just days later, a new text from my parents. "We miss you. Can we talk?" It was so predictable. The moment their plan to guilt trip me didn't work, they switched to playing the concerned parents. I didn't fall for it. I knew that the second I responded, they'd start pushing the same old narrative. That's when I made my final decision. I wasn't just ignoring them for now, I was taking a long-term break from them. They had made it clear that they would never respect my boundaries. They saw my marriage as something that should serve the family, not as my own life. And finally, my wife and I got to enjoy our honeymoon in peace. No texts, no calls, no drama, just us. And in the end, that was the real victory. A week after we got back from Bora Bora, I got a call from my mom. No crying, no yelling, just a cheerful voice like nothing had happened. "So, how was your little honeymoon?" Like we hadn't just spent weeks dealing with their insanity. Like they hadn't tried to hijack our trip. Like she hadn't posted a public rant about how I abandoned the family. I didn't respond. I let her ramble for a bit before making an excuse to hang up. A few hours later, a text from my dad came through. Apparently, the stress of my betrayal had given him high blood pressure. He made sure to let me know that the doctor said it was all the family tension that caused it. Then, the trap was set. A group message popped up from my brother and sister, inviting me to a family dinner. The message was overly sweet, way too friendly, talking about how it was just to talk and catch up. Right, because the same people who spent weeks guilt-tripping and lying about me suddenly wanted a nice dinner. I ignored it. Then my aunt called. She wasted no time jumping into a lecture about how family is family, no matter what, and that life is too short to hold grudges. She urged me to go to the dinner, saying it was important to fix things before it's too late. Then my cousin, one of the few people on my side, sent me a heads up. That dinner? It wasn't a casual meetup. It was an intervention. My mom wanted to force me to apologize in front of the entire family. They were planning to record it so she could show everyone that I was making things right. So I didn't go. That's when the news story started spreading. Suddenly, I hadn't just refused to go on the family honeymoon. No, now my wife and I had run away and abandoned them on a trip we had supposedly planned together. My parents were telling people that my wife had isolated me from my family and that I had turned my back on them out of nowhere. Then, my mom sent one of the most passive-aggressive messages I've ever seen in the family group chat. Some people don't value family anymore, but that's okay. We still love them, even if they don't love us back. No names, no direct accusations, but it was obvious who she was talking about. Then, my wife got dragged into it again. A DM from my sister. "This all started because of you. We never had these problems before you came along." She blamed my wife for changing me, acting like I hadn't spent my entire life dealing with our family's entitlement. Like I wouldn't have eventually stood up to them with or without my wife. I finally had enough. I sent one long message in the family group chat. I laid everything out, how they hijacked our honeymoon, refused to respect boundaries, gaslit me into thinking I was the problem, and then tried to manipulate me into making things right. I called them out for booking my honeymoon behind my back and expecting me to be okay with it. I made it clear that they had crossed the line, not me. And then, nothing. No replies, no arguments, just silence. But I could see that they read it. Instead of responding, they doubled down on being victims. The Facebook posts started up again. My mom and sister both posted vague, dramatic statuses about disrespectful children and when loyalty isn't returned. A few family members liked their posts, but I also noticed something else. Some relatives who used to comment on everything weren't engaging at all anymore. Then, my dad called. "You're breaking your mother's heart. Just say sorry so we can move on." That was the entire message. No acknowledgement of anything they had done. No apology. Just an expectation that I would take the blame and fix it. When I didn't respond, they took things one step further. They contacted my wife's parents. My in-laws called us, letting us know that my parents had tried to get them involved. They wanted my in-laws to convince me to make things right with the family. My in-laws shut them down immediately, telling them that we were adults who made our own decisions. That was the final straw. I updated Reddit again, venting about the latest developments, and once again the internet came through. The response was overwhelming, people validating that my family was completely unhinged and that I had made the right call. That's when my wife and I made a decision. We were going low contact with the most toxic family members. No more responding to manipulation. No more entertaining their guilt trips. No more second chances. For the first time, we were setting real boundaries. And this time we weren't backing down. The holidays were coming up, which meant one thing. My mom's next attempt at guilt tripping me. A message popped up in the family group chat, an invite to a family reconciliation Christmas dinner. The wording was over the top, talking about how Christmas is about family, love, and forgiveness. She made sure to include that, no matter what's happened, there's always room at the table. I ignored it. I wasn't walking into another trap. When it became clear that I wasn't going to budge, my family decided to take things in a different direction. They planned another group vacation. Hawaii this time. This was their big move. Their way of proving that they didn't need me. And to really drive the point home, they made sure I knew I wasn't invited. My brothers sent a message in the family chat, casually dropping their travel dates and hyping up the trip like it was the best thing ever. My sister posted about how sometimes you have to move forward with people who actually care about you. Then the flood of social media posts started. Photos at the airport, pictures of their drinks at the resort, captions about how family time is the best time. It was obvious what they were doing. They were trying to make me jealous, trying to make it seem like they were having the time of their lives without me. Then the cracks started to show. One of my cousins, the same one who had given me the heads up about their fake intervention, sent me a message. Apparently the trip was a disaster. They were fighting over money. My parents had assumed that everyone would be splitting certain costs, while my brother and sister thought mom and dad would be paying for everything. Nobody wanted to cover the extra expenses. The resort wasn't as nice as they had expected, and just to top it all off, they were still mad about the Maldives and were bringing it up constantly. Then my mom hit her breaking point. A new Facebook post. A long dramatic rant about how family used to mean something and how sometimes the people you love most will hurt you the deepest. Again, no names. But the meaning was crystal clear. Then my dad made his move. A single call. Straight to the point. It's time to come home. Stop this nonsense. I refused. That's when my sister tried a different approach. She's engaged. Her wedding is coming up. And now, suddenly my attendance was up for debate. She sent me a message. No explanation, just a simple, if you don't apologize, you're not invited to my wedding. I responded with one word. Okay, that wasn't the answer she wanted. She immediately blew up, sending me a wall of text about how could I do this to our family and how I was making everything worse. That's when the real reason for their anger came out. It wasn't just about control. They wanted their money back. Apparently, my parents and siblings were still upset about the money they lost when they booked their Maldives trip. They were convinced that I should have somehow made it up to them. My brother came right out and asked me to pay them back for ruining the trip. I blocked him, but the real kicker. Another cousin messaged me privately, saying, honestly, everyone thought that trip was a dumb idea. So even people within the family knew my parents were being ridiculous. But no one wanted to be the first to say it. Then my mom made her final emotional play. A call, tears, dramatic pauses. I just want my son back. I kept my response simple. I told her that she never lost me. They were the ones who pushed me away. She had nothing to say to that. She just sighed and hung up. Then the last attempt at manipulation. My parents tried to go through my wife. My mom invited her to a girls' spa day. Supposedly it was to reconnect and talk things through. But we both knew what it really was. A way to pressure her into convincing me to cave. She declined. That was the final move. At that point my wife and I both knew there was nothing to fix here. Not until my family actually took responsibility for their actions. And so, for the first time in months we felt free. No more guilt. No more manipulation. Just peace. And honestly, it felt great. The final blow-up started the same way most of this drama did, with my mom twisting the story to anyone who would listen. This time she went straight to extended family, telling them I had disowned my entire family after getting married. She made sure to paint herself as the heartbroken mother who just didn't know where she went wrong. She left out the part where they hijacked my honeymoon, manipulated, guilt-tripped, and tried to force me to apologize for their mistakes. Then, my aunt decided to step in. She sent me a message saying she wanted to mediate a conversation between both sides. Her plan? A group call where we could talk things out like adults. She said my parents missed me and just wanted to clear the air. I told her straight up, I wasn't interested in any conversation unless my parents actually acknowledged what they did. No response. That was the end of that. Then my dad snapped. A long, furious text. You'll regret this when we're gone. Not even an attempt to fix things. Just pure emotional manipulation. I ignored it. Then came my sister's last move. She made it official. I was uninvited from her wedding. It was supposed to be a punishment, like I would suddenly beg for forgiveness, because I just couldn't bear missing her big day. Instead, I didn't react at all. Didn't ask questions. Didn't argue. Didn't care. And then karma hit. A cousin messaged me, letting me know that half the family was refusing to attend her wedding because of all the drama. Some didn't want to take sides. Others were sick of the family chaos, and a few just flat out didn't want to deal with my parents anymore. So my sister's plan backfired. Big time. Then, they tried one last attempt at fixing everything. A family healing retreat. Yes, seriously. My parents sent out an invite to some retreat that was supposed to bring everyone together and move past the negativity. A full weekend of group bonding and rebuilding family trust. I laughed and declined. I already knew exactly what it was. Another manipulation attempt disguised as a fresh start. Then, my mom finally snapped. One last dramatic message in the family group chat. I hope you're happy. You've broken this family apart. We did everything for you and this is how you repay us. You've ruined everything. That was it. No accountability. No realization of how they pushed me away. Just more guilt tripping. I ignored it. And then my cousin sent me one final piece of information. Something that honestly was both hilarious and completely predictable. Apparently, my mom admitted to a few family members that maybe they had pushed too hard. So she knew they went too far. She knew they were wrong, but she would never say it to me directly. Then, something I didn't expect. Months later, my dad reached out, but this time, it wasn't another attempt to force an apology. I don't agree with you, but I miss you. It was the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get from him. But my mom, she still refused to admit anything. No apology, no responsibility, just stubborn silence. That's when I knew this was just how it was going to be. I decided to keep my boundaries up. No contact with the most toxic family members. Polite, distant interactions with the rest. No drama, no arguments. Just moving forward on my own terms. Through all of this, my wife stood by me. She supported every decision I made and never once pressured me to fix things with people who refused to change. If anything, this entire experience made our marriage even stronger. And then, something weird happened. Some family members started drifting back. A few cousins reached out. Even my sister, who had been one of the loudest voices against me, slowly started acting normal again. No apology, but suddenly she wasn't treating me like the villain anymore. And the ultimate irony, the family never actually had fun on their hijacked Maldives trip. They don't even talk about it anymore. It was supposed to be their big family vacation, but in the end, it was just a mess of stress, money issues, and drama. Now, my wife and I are living our best lives. No more manipulation, no more guilt, just peace. And my family? Well, they're finally starting to realize they were the problem all along. Months passed, and just like that, my family switched tactics. After all the drama, the guilt tripping, the fake interventions, and the emotional blackmail, they decided their next best move was to pretend none of it ever happened. No more dramatic Facebook posts, no more guilt-ridden texts, no more indirect jabs, just silence. Then, out of nowhere, a message from my mom. Hey, hope you're doing well. Thinking of making your favorite meal this weekend. No apology, no acknowledgement of the chaos they caused. Just a casual let's act like we're a normal family again text. I ignored it. Then my dad tried his version of peace. A quick invite to grab a drink. No mention of the honeymoon, the insults, or the endless attempts to manipulate me. Just a simple, let's just move forward. Moving forward, in his mind, meant forgetting everything they did while I was expected to act like it never happened. I ignored him too. Meanwhile, my sister, who had uninvited me from her wedding, was now dealing with her own drama. Her fiancé's family wasn't cooperating, they didn't like the wedding venue, there were arguments about guest lists, and ironically, they didn't want certain family members attending. A cousin told me that my sister had been venting about how exhausting wedding planning was, and how some people just don't know how to respect boundaries. The irony was almost too much. But karma wasn't stopping there. The same family that had ganged up on me was now fighting each other. Arguments over money. Sibling rivalries resurfacing. My parents, who always acted like they kept the family together, were now dealing with relatives who weren't speaking to each other over petty travel expenses. And then, the biggest shock of all, one of my cousins, who had originally sided with them, sent me a message. A full-blown apology. They admitted that they felt pressured to take my parents' side, that they didn't agree with what my family did, but went along with it because they didn't want to be the next target. And then, they dropped the real reason behind the family's sudden silence. It wasn't because they had moved on. It wasn't because they regretted their behavior. It was because my mom was embarrassed. She had gone so far with her manipulation tactics, dragging my name through the mud, rallying the family against me, trying every trick in the book to guilt me into submission, and it didn't work. She had no idea how to fix it without admitting she was wrong. So instead, she chose silence. Even the once active family group chat was dead. No passive-aggressive messages. No forced family bonding attempts. Just an occasional shared meme or holiday greeting. It was weird at first, but honestly, peaceful. Meanwhile, my wife and I were already planning our anniversary trip. Just us. No group chat. No surprise family bookings. No guilt. Then, the soft reaching out started. My brother and sister suddenly began liking my social media posts. No comments, no messages, just quiet engagement, like they were testing the waters. Then my mom made another move. A dinner invite. I promise I won't talk about the past, unless you want to. Another attempt to control the narrative. If I brought it up, then I was the one dragging out the drama. If I didn't, then it meant we were just moving on like nothing happened. I ignored that too. Then, out of nowhere, my sister's wedding invite resurfaced. After making a huge deal about how I wasn't welcome unless I apologized, she suddenly changed her tune. If you want, I guess you can come to my wedding. No apology, no acknowledgement of everything she said. Just an I guess. I declined. That's when my mom tried one last time. A dramatic text. I just want my family together again before it's too late. Still no ownership of her actions. Still no accountability. Just another attempt to guilt me into fixing what she broke. I didn't respond. And for the first time in years, I finally felt free. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to prove anything. I didn't need to keep the peace with people who had spent so much time tearing me down. My wife and I were happy, and that was all that mattered. A year passed and life had never been more peaceful. My wife and I went on our anniversary trip, this time with no drama, no unexpected family bookings, and no passive-aggressive messages. Just us. Exactly how a trip should be. We spent our time exploring, relaxing, and actually enjoying the vacation without feeling like we had to look over our shoulders. Meanwhile, my family was still a disaster. My sister's wedding, after all the ultimatums and threats, was a complete mess. A cousin reached out, filling me in on everything. Half the guests backed out. The in-laws weren't cooperating. My parents tried controlling parts of the wedding, and there were multiple arguments leading up to the big day. I asked why they kept sharing all of this with me. Honestly, they admitted, I don't agree with how they treated you. I just can't say that out loud. Even on the wedding day itself, there was tension between my sister and my parents. It wasn't the perfect wedding she had imagined. And considering how she had acted like banning me was some kind of power move, the karma was a little too perfect. But that didn't stop my mom from playing the victim. Her Facebook statuses hadn't stopped. She was still posting cryptic messages about family who forgets where they came from, and some people choose pride over love. Again, no names, but everyone knew who she was talking about. At this point, it was just embarrassing. And apparently, I wasn't the only one who thought so. My cousin revealed that the family was still divided. The honeymoon drama had done permanent damage. Some relatives had backed off from my parents and siblings completely. They were tired of the drama, sick of the guilt trips, and just wanted to avoid the toxicity. Then there were the cousins who had once stayed quiet but were now privately siding with me. A few even admitted that they wished they had the courage to stand up to their own families like I did. Then my dad tried one last man-to-man talk. He reached out, casually asking to grab a beer. No apology, no acknowledgement of everything that had happened. Just a let's move on attitude. Like nothing had ever happened. I declined. Then there was my brother, still bitter, still refusing to speak to me. According to another cousin, he still blamed me for ruining the family trip. A whole year later. Then came the most predictable update yet. My sister's marriage was already in trouble. Barely a few months in, and cracks were already showing. A cousin mentioned that she and her husband had been arguing constantly. Financial issues, in-law drama, and control problems. Funny how she spent so much time claiming that my wife was the problem in my life, yet here she was, dealing with her own mess. Meanwhile, the family group chat, a ghost town. What used to be constant messages, forced bonding and guilt tripping was now silent. An occasional shared meme, the rare holiday greeting, but nothing else. And the ultimate irony, my mom, who spent years forcing family vacations, was now complaining that no one wanted to do them anymore. Turns out, the family had gotten so sick of how the Maldives trip went down, that no one wanted to plan another one. The same people who attacked me for ruining their vacation were now refusing to travel together. Meanwhile, my wife and I were stronger than ever. Cutting out the toxicity had made our marriage better, not worse. No stress, no manipulation, just us living our lives the way we wanted. Then, my dad softened up. One night, he quietly called. No anger this time, no guilt tripping. Just a simple I understand why you did what you did. I don't know how to fix things. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing I had ever gotten from him. But my mom, still refusing to admit any fault, still acting like I was the one who abandoned them. Some family members started testing the waters, inviting me to small gatherings, casually reaching out, not pushing anything, just feeling out where I stood. I decided I was open to limited contact, but only on my terms. No guilt tripping, no manipulation, no forced apologies. I had made one thing clear. If they wanted me in their lives, they had to respect my boundaries. And if they couldn't, then I was fine walking away for good. A year of silence then, out of nowhere, my mom sent a long text. She missed me. She wanted to start fresh. She didn't say what she was apologizing for, just that she hated how things turned out and wished we could go back to how things used to be. Seemed convenient. A few days later, I found out why. A cousin casually mentioned that my family was planning another big vacation. This time, a massive family reunion-style trip. Flights, resort bookings, the works. Suddenly, my mom's timing made sense. She wanted me back in the fold, but not because she missed me. She wanted me there to help pay for this next trip. Then she accidentally confirmed it. A follow-up text. It would be nice to have a big family trip again someday. Like old times. There it was. I called her bluff. I responded with, I'll consider reconnecting if we actually talk about what happened. No reply. She wanted a reunion, but only if I played along, only if I pretended like none of this ever happened. Then, another cousin spilled more family drama. Apparently, my mom was struggling to hold the family together. So many relatives had distanced themselves after the honeymoon disaster. The constant drama, manipulation, and guilt tripping had pushed people away. The family wasn't as close as it used to be, and some relatives straight up avoided any gathering my parents hosted. Then my brother, who hadn't spoken to me in over a year, broke his silence. No apology. No acknowledgement of the feud. Just a casual message like we had spoken yesterday. Then my sister made her move. A guilt trip message. Mom cries about you all the time. Just let it go. I ignored it. Even after all this time, they still refused to accept reality. Then I got another update from my cousin. Apparently, my name still came up in family arguments. A full year later, and they were still talking about me. Then the last-ditch effort. A final message from my dad. You'll regret losing your family one day. I calmly responded, I didn't lose my family. They lost me. That was the last thing I ever sent them. Then I updated Reddit. The response? Overwhelming support. People applauding the boundaries I set, calling out my family's toxic behavior, and telling me to keep going. Then, the ultimate karma moment. The big family vacation they had planned, it fell apart. Half the relatives bailed. Some refused to deal with my parents. Others were tired of the constant drama. The same people who once forced me into family vacations couldn't even get the family to show up anymore. And my mom, the one who had always pushed family unity above everything else, was now struggling to hold the family together. Meanwhile, my wife and I had moved on completely. We started our own traditions, our own vacations, our own family. No drama, no guilt tripping, no toxicity, just peace. Then one final attempt at manipulation. A last message from my mom. I guess you don't care about family anymore. I left her on read, because real family isn't about control. It isn't about guilt. It isn't about forcing people to comply. It's about respect. And if they couldn't give me that, then I was better off without them. I'm a 30-year-old guy, and after a couple of years of planning, I'm just a few months away from marrying the love of my life. Everything for the wedding was mostly set. Venue booked, guest list confirmed, food and decorations chosen. It's been a lot of work, but my fiancé and I were excited to make the day special for us. That was until my younger sister, who's 26, decided to drop a bombshell on the family. One night, out of the blue, she announced that her boyfriend proposed. The whole family was together, celebrating my dad's birthday, so the timing was interesting. She showed off the ring, and everyone was immediately excited for her. I was happy too, congratulated her, and thought that was it. Just another family milestone, and now I had a wedding and her engagement to look forward to in the future. But then, my parents had this brilliant idea. Not even a day later, my mom called me, completely hyped. She suggested that, since all the family would be coming to my wedding anyway, we could just throw a surprise engagement party for my sister during the reception. She said it'd be like killing two birds with one stone since everyone would already be there, and it'd save money and time for my sister's side of things. Honestly, I was stunned. It felt wrong. But I didn't immediately say no. I just told her I'd need to think about it. When I talked it over with my fiancée, she was shocked. For her, the wedding was meant to be our day, and she couldn't understand why my family would want to make it about something else. And frankly, neither could I. We'd worked hard to put this together, and it felt like an overreach. My fiancé suggested it'd be best to politely tell them no, setting a clear boundary. I agreed. The next day, I called my mom to gently explain that we'd prefer to keep the wedding focused on us. I tried to frame it in a way that wouldn't come off as selfish, just that this day was something we'd been planning as our own. But she didn't take it well. Right off the bat, she started talking about how it would be a once-in-a-lifetime moment for my sister, too, and how great it would be to make it a double celebration. She kept going on about family unity and how it would be such a special gesture for everyone involved. Then my sister started chiming in. She was over the moon about the idea, already picturing herself being celebrated with her boyfriend in front of all the family and friends. She was acting as if the decision had already been made, excitedly asking me if I thought the venue would have space for an extra setup for her engagement announcement. I could barely get a word in, but finally managed to say that we decided not to include the engagement in the wedding plans. And that's when things started to spiral. My mom didn't take it well. She hit me with all kinds of guilt-laden arguments, like how my sister's always been sensitive and how disappointed she'd be. She even dredged up some old memory about a family reunion years ago where I apparently hogged the spotlight. I barely remember that happening, but the implication was clear. This time I should give back and make space for my sister. As if that wasn't enough, it didn't take long for the family to stop asking me about my wedding plans. Every conversation would inevitably turn back to my sister's engagement. They were always talking about what colors might suit her theme, or where they could find decor for an engagement that might blend in with the wedding decorations. It was like my wedding was slowly becoming a backdrop for her celebration. My fiancée was growing more and more frustrated. At one point, she suggested we should just elope and avoid all this drama, but we both knew that wasn't what we wanted. We had a vision for our wedding, and neither of us wanted to sacrifice it. But the family's constant pushing and passive-aggressive remarks at every family dinner were getting harder to ignore. Meanwhile, my sister was completely wrapped up in the idea. She'd send me these excited texts about how she couldn't wait to surprise everyone with her big moment and make it an unforgettable day for both of us. She didn't seem to pick up on my lack of enthusiasm, even though I'd stopped replying to those messages. I confided in a few close friends about what was going on. They were all on the same page. It was ridiculous that my family was asking for this. They encouraged me to stand firm, and while it was reassuring to hear, things only got worse when my parents found out I'd been airing our family business. That made the family gatherings even more awkward, as my parents would drop subtle, passive-aggressive hints about how family loyalty and unity were more important than individual needs. The pressure was definitely mounting, and every time I felt like I'd found the strength to stand firm, my family found a new way to make me feel like I was being selfish. They were trying every tactic, guilt, subtle digs, and reminders of all they've done for me. I started questioning myself, wondering if maybe I was the one being unreasonable. It seemed like a small thing, a compromise for family unity, but every time I thought about it, I felt this deep sense that it wasn't right. And so, that's where things stand. I'm torn between standing up for the wedding my fiancé and I have planned and giving in to keep the peace. Family loyalty means a lot to me, but at what cost? With every passing day, it's getting harder to balance wanting to be a good brother and wanting to keep our day about us. This is supposed to be the happiest time of our lives, but it's turning into a constant struggle just to protect that happiness. Update 1. The pressure kicked into overdrive almost immediately after I told my family I wasn't going to turn my wedding into an engagement party for my sister. It started with little things. My mom started texting me every morning, throwing in phrases like being a good brother and putting family first. Sometimes she'd send a whole paragraph about how life is about sacrifices and compromise and how important family unity was. Every message seemed aimed at making me feel guilty, and after a week of this, I could practically predict what she'd say each day. Then my sister's fiancé texted me, and he made it even more direct. He wrote that he thought it would be a small sacrifice for me to share my wedding day. He pointed out that, since our whole family would be there, it just made sense to celebrate love together. It was as if he was just assuming I'd go along with it, like I'd finally cave under the pressure. Around the same time, I started noticing weird issues popping up with the wedding planning. My mom was supposed to help coordinate with the florist since she knew the owner, but somehow the flowers I picked got swapped out for better suited colors, ones that would apparently look more neutral in case we wanted to blend the wedding with a different theme. Then the caterer said they got a call from my parents telling them to leave some flexibility in the menu so we could add a few extra items. I had no idea they'd even been talking to the vendors, but suddenly it was clear they were trying to reshape the day to fit this double celebration idea. My fiancée was the first to point it out. She said they were doing it on purpose, trying to manipulate us into backing down by making subtle changes here and there. At first I didn't want to believe that they'd go that far, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. It felt sneaky and manipulative, like they were setting it up so that we'd just give in to avoid the constant sabotage. Eventually, my fiancé's family found out about the whole situation. Her parents were shocked, couldn't believe that my family would try to hijack our wedding for an engagement announcement. They were immediately on our side, saying that our wedding day should be just for us and offering to help however they could. That support was a relief, especially as things kept escalating with my family. One night, my sister called me, and as soon as I picked up, I could hear her sniffling. She launched into this whole emotional spiel, saying she thought I'd be more supportive, that she was hurt by how I'd reacted, and that she'd always looked up to me. She kept saying she just wanted her family to be there for her, and now she felt like I was letting her down. The guilt tripping was thick, and by the time the call ended, I knew she'd succeeded in getting me to question myself, even though I'd been so sure before. After that, my parents started hinting that they might not attend the wedding if we couldn't find a way to come together as a family. They didn't outright say they wouldn't come, but there were enough "maybe we should sit this one out" comments that I got the message. They were trying to push me into a corner, making it seem like if I didn't let my sister have her engagement moment, I'd be breaking up the family. It didn't take long for other family members to start calling me, too. My parents had clearly been sharing a version of the story that made me look like the villain, and soon enough I was getting calls from aunts, uncles, even a few cousins, all asking why I couldn't just compromise for the sake of family harmony. The word selfish came up more times than I could count, and I quickly realized they'd only heard my parents' side of things. Then came the financial threats. My parents had offered to help pay for a part of the wedding, and they wasted no time reminding me of that. My dad casually mentioned that they were reconsidering their contribution, saying they didn't know if they could support a wedding that tore the family apart. The implication was clear: if I didn't go along with the engagement party idea, they'd pull their funding. My fiancé and I started talking about alternative plans. She suggested that maybe we could scale down the wedding to take financial control away from my parents, making sure they couldn't hold it over our heads. It was a tough pill to swallow, thinking about cutting down our guest list and scaling back the day we'd dreamed about. But the idea of having a day that was truly ours started sounding better and better. During all of this, I started seeing things I hadn't noticed before. The way my parents always seemed to go out of their way for my sister, how they'd bend over backward to make her happy, and how quick they were to criticize me if I didn't fall in line. I started realizing that this wasn't just about the wedding. My parents had always favored her, and I just ignored it, thinking it wasn't that serious. Finally, I decided to talk to my sister directly. I wanted to try, one last time, to explain why this wasn't fair. But as soon as I brought it up, she became defensive, saying I was ruining her moment and how she didn't understand why I couldn't just be a good brother. She kept throwing guilt at me, making it sound like this was all my fault. And by the end of the conversation, I knew that talking wasn't going to change her mind. Things came to a head in our family group chat. My mom started it, saying we needed to work this out, but it quickly turned into a full-blown argument, with relatives picking sides and tensions boiling over. Some supported me, saying a wedding should be about the couple, while others sided with my parents, calling me selfish. It was chaos. By the end of it, I was done. I decided to confirm everything with the venue, locking in our plans exactly as we'd envisioned them, and I told my family that the wedding would go ahead without any changes. It was a line in the sand, and I wasn't going to let anyone cross it. Update 2. Not long after my last message to the family chat, my parents followed through on their threat. They sent me a message saying they were pulling all financial support for the wedding. It wasn't just a warning this time, they were done, and whatever money they'd planned to contribute was off the table. They made it clear they weren't going to fund such a selfish celebration if I couldn't be flexible for my sister's special moment. I had half expected it, but it still felt like a low blow. With their support gone, my fiancé and I had to sit down and look at our budget all over again. We knew we had to make some tough choices if we wanted to stay within our means without their help. So we started trimming. We cut out anything that wasn't essential, narrowed down the decorations, chose simpler menu options, and even talked about scaling back the guest list to just the people who were genuinely supportive. My fiance's family noticed what we were going through, and they stepped up, offering to help cover some of the gaps. I didn't want to take their money at first. It felt wrong to drag them into this mess. But they insisted, saying it was just as much their family celebration, and eventually I accepted. Things didn't stop there. Soon, it seemed like everyone had an opinion. My extended family had been hearing different versions of the story, and I started getting messages from relatives I hadn't talked to in months. Some were supportive, saying it was ridiculous that my wedding was even being turned into this argument. But others, not so much. A few accused me of being heartless, and I even had a cousin message me to say I was ruining the family bond over something so small. They'd clearly only heard my parents' side of things, and it was exhausting to explain myself over and over. Then, my sister's friends got involved. Out of nowhere, I started getting messages from her close friends, telling me I was hurting her by being so stubborn. They kept calling it just one little moment that I could share with her. The messages kept coming, each one dripping with guilt-tripping language, as if my wedding wasn't supposed to be my own day anymore. I tried ignoring them, but it felt like I was getting ambushed from every angle. To top it off, my parents took the drama online. They started posting these vague, passive-aggressive comments on social media about family loyalty and how selfishness destroys family unity. They never mentioned my name, but everyone in the family circle knew who they were talking about. Every time they posted, I'd get more messages from people, either showing support or grilling me for breaking family unity. It was a nightmare, watching my own family turn against me in such a public way. After a week of all this, my fiancé and I sat down and made a tough decision. We'd already cut down on some costs, but we decided to make the guest list even smaller, focusing on those who were genuinely there for us. The guest list went from a big celebration to a more intimate gathering. We agreed we'd rather celebrate with people who supported us than have a bigger wedding filled with people judging us. But the drama wasn't over. My sister decided to take it to another level. She called me, saying she might not attend the wedding if her engagement wasn't included. She was acting as if I was the one being unreasonable, and now she was playing the victim, telling me I'd left her with no choice. It didn't even feel like a wedding anymore. It was turning into a power struggle. With all the stress mounting, my fiancé and I decided to try something new: counseling. We needed a neutral place to work through all the tension, and a friend recommended a counselor who helped with family dynamics. During one of our sessions, my fiancé finally admitted she was done with my family's constant manipulations and suggested that maybe we should cut contact after the wedding, at least for a while. I wasn't sure how I felt about going no contact, but I could see her point. The drama was taking a toll on us. One night, after yet another heated argument with my parents, I reached my breaking point. Everything I'd tried to keep bottled up just poured out. I felt like I was breaking down under the weight of it all. The betrayal, the constant judgment, the feeling that my family didn't care about my happiness. My best friend came over and listened as I vented, reminding me that this was my wedding and my life. He told me to focus on what made me happy, not on what everyone else wanted. The next day, I decided to confront my parents in person. I went over, and I didn't hold back. I laid it all out: how they'd always seemed to prioritize my sister's happiness, how they were using manipulation and guilt to get what they wanted, and how I wasn't going to let them control this day. They tried to argue, throwing back all the old lines about family unity and sacrifice, but I didn't let it slide. For once, I said everything I'd been holding in. Walking out of that conversation, I felt like something had finally clicked. I realized my family had always put my sister first, and maybe I'd been ignoring that fact for years. It hurt, but I wasn't going to let them ruin this moment. I was done letting their expectations define me. After that, I made a decision. This wedding was going to be about my fiancé and me, and nothing else. No more guilt, no more pressure, and definitely no more manipulation. I wasn't going to let my family's demands overshadow our day any longer. I knew they'd probably keep pushing, but for the first time, I felt ready to stand my ground. Update 3. Soon after my confrontation with my parents, things took a new turn. My sister decided to take the story to social media. She posted a long, dramatic message about how family should always come first and how devastated she was that I wasn't supporting her engagement. Without naming me directly, she painted this picture of herself as the victim of a selfish brother who wouldn't let her share in one of the happiest days of her life. Comments started flooding in from people I didn't even know, offering her support and saying how sad it was that she had such a heartless sibling. It didn't take long for this to spiral. Mutual friends and family members began unfollowing me, clearly buying into her story. A few of my relatives sent me messages asking how I could be so cold and thoughtless. It was amazing how quickly they sided with her after hearing one biased version of events. The backlash was overwhelming, but I tried to focus on the people who were still in my corner. Thankfully, my fiancé's family remained solidly supportive. They heard what my family was doing and offered their home as a backup location for any wedding-related gatherings. They assured me that, regardless of how my own family behaved, I had a family with them. That simple gesture was a huge relief. As for my social media, I'd had enough. I blocked my sister, my parents, and anyone else who seemed to be sending passive-aggressive messages. I didn't want to see any more of their posts, their comments, or their attempts to spin the story. It was time to set some real boundaries. I decided to formally tell my parents and sister that I was going no contact with them until after the wedding. I sent a short, clear message explaining that I needed space and wouldn't be engaging with them until the wedding was over. They didn't take it well, of course, but I ignored the responses. With the constant messages and comments out of the way, I started to feel a bit of relief. It was the first time in weeks that I could actually focus on planning my wedding without interruptions or guilt trips. My fiancé and I dove back into the details, finalizing the food, confirming the decorations, and making sure everything was on track for the day we'd been dreaming about. For a brief moment, it felt like things were finally back to normal. But then my parents tried a new tactic. They reached out to my fiancé, hoping she'd mediate and convince me to let my sister have her engagement announcement. They kept pushing her, trying to make it sound like I was destroying the family by sticking to our decision. My fiancé, however, wasn't having it. She politely told them that this was our wedding, that we were a united front, and that they needed to respect our boundaries. They tried a few more times, but she stayed firm, refusing to let them manipulate her. At the same time, some extended family members started chiming in with their opinions. They suggested I was just envious of my sister's engagement, saying things like, "It's not all about you," and hinting that I should be more supportive as an older sibling. Every message seemed to twist the knife a bit more, but I had to remind myself of my own boundaries. I didn't respond, I just focused on keeping my head down and moving forward with the plans. With each day, the wedding grew closer, and my fiancé and I made our final bookings. We knew we wanted this day to be everything we'd dreamed of, and we weren't going to let anyone interfere. But rumors started circulating that my sister was planning to make her engagement announcement at the wedding, whether I allowed it or not. Supposedly, she had mentioned to some friends that she would take matters into her own hands if I didn't let her have her way. A few friends suggested I consider hiring security for the wedding, just in case anyone tried to make a scene or hijack the day. It seemed extreme, but after everything that had happened, I wasn't about to take any chances. So, I spoke with the venue and arranged for a couple of security staff to be there on the day. They would keep an eye on things and make sure that nothing went off course. To make everything crystal clear, I sent out a message to all our guests. I explained that this day was about celebrating my fiancé and me, and asked that everyone respect the focus of the event. It wasn't directly aimed at my sister or parents, but anyone reading it could understand the message. No surprises, no engagement announcements, nothing that would take away from our wedding. Even with all the boundaries set, my parents hinted that they might still show up uninvited to speak their truth and set the record straight. They were being vague, but it was clear they wanted to make a scene. I told the venue security to be on alert for any uninvited guests and to handle any disruptions quietly and professionally. Despite everything, I felt a strange sense of peace as the day approached. Setting these boundaries, cutting ties with the people who tried to control me, it wasn't easy, but it was necessary. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe, like I was actually in control of my life and my choices. This wedding would be ours, no matter what my family tried to pull. And that decision, to protect my happiness and focus on my future with my fiancé, felt right. Update 4. On the morning of the wedding, I was greeted by an unexpected call from my parents. They were pleading for a last-minute compromise, asking me to let my sister have her engagement announcement as part of the day. They kept repeating how important family unity was and how I was tearing the family apart. It was their final attempt to guilt me, but I stood my ground, told them no, and ended the call. I had no intention of letting them ruin this day. With my family drama weighing on me, I was thankful that we'd arranged for security at the venue. We knew my parents and sister might try something, and after everything that had happened, I wasn't going to take any chances. The security team was briefed on who to watch for, and were ready to handle any potential disruptions discreetly. As I got ready, my nerves were all over the place. There was excitement, a bit of tension, but mostly this determination not to let anything get in the way. My close friends noticed and were right by my side, offering support and making sure everything ran smoothly. They even organized themselves to keep an eye on any family members who might stir up trouble. It was like they had formed a shield around me, making sure I felt protected on my wedding day. When we arrived at the venue, a few relatives who had previously sided with my sister showed up. They exchanged some awkward glances and quiet greetings, clearly feeling the tension. My friends quickly stepped in to handle any uncomfortable moments, guiding these relatives to their seats without giving them a chance to bring up any drama. Despite the strained interactions, everything remained calm, and I kept my focus on the ceremony ahead. As guests filled the seats, it became clear that my sister wasn't there. After all the back and forth, she'd decided not to attend. It was a relief not to worry about any last-minute announcements or stunts, but it was also a sad realization. Despite all the issues, I had hoped she might come, but her absence said more than words could. It confirmed that, to her, this engagement was more important than being there for her brother. Just when I thought things were settling, security informed me that my parents were at the entrance, trying to sneak into the venue without an invitation. They claimed they just wanted a few minutes to talk, but the security team held firm, telling them they couldn't enter without my permission. My parents tried to push their way in, causing a bit of a scene, but security managed it professionally, escorting them away before they could cause any major disruption. Knowing they were outside trying to force their way and just reinforced my decision to hire security, it had been the right call. Inside the venue, my fiancé's family became my emotional support, especially her parents, who treated me like one of their own. They were warm, comforting, and did everything they could to make me feel like I belonged. It was a relief to feel surrounded by people who genuinely cared, and they kept the mood light, helping me forget about everything outside the venue. When the ceremony finally began, everything else faded away. I was focused on my fiancé, on the vows we had written, and the love and support we felt from those who came to celebrate with us. There was no drama, no disruptions, just the quiet beauty of the moment. The ceremony went off without a hitch, filled with emotion, love, and a sense of calm I hadn't felt in weeks. Later, as we moved into the reception, security discreetly handled a few distant relatives who made some comments about the missing family and tried to stir things up. They were quickly ushered out without much fuss, and the rest of the guests barely noticed. We were able to enjoy the evening, celebrating with the people who truly cared about us. After everything was said and done, my fiancé and I felt a mix of relief and joy. We had overcome so much to get here, and standing there as husband and wife, surrounded by people who loved us, felt like the perfect ending to an otherwise chaotic journey. Friends and family members who had seen everything unfold came up to us, offering words of admiration and support, saying how much they respected us for standing firm and refusing to let family pressure ruin our day. But the drama didn't end there. Almost immediately after the wedding, my parents and sister took to social media again. This time, they were in full swing, posting about selfish people and how sad it is when family turns their back on you. They didn't mention my name, but it was obvious who they were talking about. My sister even hinted that she was hurt by how I'd pushed her away on one of the most important days of her life, as if I had somehow wronged her. Despite the online jabs, I chose not to engage. I left their comments unanswered, focused on the life my fiancé and I were starting together. There was no point in diving back into the drama, not after all we'd gone through. Instead, we began planning a quiet honeymoon and looked forward to the future we'd been fighting for. The day had been everything we wanted, and no amount of passive-aggressive posts or family gossip could take that away from us. It was our day, and nothing my family did could ruin the memories we'd made. Update 5. The day after the wedding, my parents and sister didn't waste a second. They were back on social media, posting vague, passive-aggressive comments implying they'd been wronged, left out, and mistreated. My parents shared cryptic messages about family unity and how sad it was when people abandoned the ones who raised them. My sister was more direct, posting a long message about learning who truly supports you in life, which clearly aimed to paint me as the bad guy. The comments under her post were filled with people giving her sympathy, completely unaware of the full story. Then, right on cue, my sister made her engagement announcement public. She posted a slideshow with photos of her ring, shots of her and her fiancé smiling, and a big dramatic caption about starting this new chapter with the man she loves. It was obvious that she was trying to shift all the attention back to herself, hoping everyone would forget about my wedding. I stayed off social media that day, wanting no part in the drama, but it didn't stop friends and relatives from reaching out to me directly. Some of my friends and supportive family members saw the posts and contacted me to express their shock. They couldn't believe the lengths my family was going to after everything that had happened. A few relatives who'd previously stayed neutral even called to say they now understood my decision to set boundaries. They offered words of encouragement, saying they admired how I'd handled it all, and that I'd done the right thing by standing my ground. But the family drama didn't end there. A day later, I got a long email from my parents. It was a mess of accusations, guilt-tripping, and demands. They insisted I owed my sister an apology, that I should reconcile with her for the sake of family unity, and that they were disappointed in the person I'd become. They even hinted that if I didn't reach out to make amends, I would be cutting myself off from the family for good. It was a clear ultimatum, aimed at pressuring me back into their fold. I showed the email to my husband, who read it with a calm expression, and then told me to stay strong. He reminded me that we'd set these boundaries for a reason, and that we deserved to protect our peace. He encouraged me to block them completely, at least temporarily, if it would help me breathe easier. After everything, it felt like the right move. I didn't want to keep reading their guilt-laden messages, so I went ahead and blocked my parents and sister on all platforms. Soon after, a few extended family members reached out privately to show their support. They told me that I was brave for standing up against the family's manipulation, and that I didn't deserve the treatment I'd been getting. Some even mentioned that they'd cut back contact with my parents because they'd witnessed the toxic behavior firsthand over the years. Their words were reassuring, a reminder that not everyone was buying into my parents' narrative. Feeling grateful for the support I had, I decided to make a short post of my own, but without getting into the drama. I simply shared a photo from our wedding day with a heartfelt thank you to everyone who stood by us. I expressed my gratitude for my friends, my husband's family, and those who had offered their love and support. It was a subtle way to acknowledge the people who mattered to me without getting dragged into a public argument with my family. That didn't stop my parents from trying one last trick. Unable to reach me, they contacted my in-laws, hoping to get them to mediate and push for reconciliation. They tried framing it as a plea to restore family ties, but my in-laws politely but firmly shut it down. They told my parents they wouldn't interfere in my decisions and that I had their full support. My in-laws made it clear they respected my independence and they wouldn't be swayed by outside pressure. It was a huge relief to know that my husband's family was on my side, unwavering in their support. Just days after the wedding, I received a promotion at work. It was a welcome surprise and a much-needed distraction, giving me something positive to focus on. The new responsibilities helped shift my attention away from the family drama, and I started to find a renewed sense of purpose. It felt like the perfect time to dive into my career, now that I was beginning this new chapter with my husband. Encouraged by him, I also decided to start therapy. The constant pressure and emotional turmoil had taken a toll, and I needed help processing it all. In therapy, I started to understand the patterns in my family's behavior and worked on setting even healthier boundaries. I I realized that I didn't have to accept toxic behavior just because it came from family. Therapy gave me a new perspective, helping me see that I could build a sense of family with people who truly respected and supported me. A few weeks later, my sister reached out again. She sent a half-hearted apology message, saying she was sorry if things got out of hand, but quickly followed it with excuses about how she'd only been acting out of excitement for her engagement. It didn't feel sincere, and I didn't feel the need to respond. I didn't owe her anything at this point. Through therapy, I gained the strength to stop seeking approval from people who didn't genuinely care about my happiness. I realized that family doesn't have to mean enduring endless guilt trips and manipulation. I could choose to surround myself with people who respected me and valued my boundaries. With that newfound clarity, I fully committed to my future with my husband, ready to build a family centered on respect, love, and understanding. The weight of guilt and obligation started to lift, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace and relief. I knew I had made the right choice, prioritizing my own happiness and standing up for myself.